So yeah, the three of you all are passionate, as I said, about agriculture, but you look at it from very different perspectives. And as I already said, Mr. Berninger, you're very brave, because it's not an easy stand you have, but I guess you knew what you were doing. When leaving first the Green Party, you were, I'm going to read it so that I don't get it wrong, you are a long-serving member of the Bundestag, State Secretary at the Federal Ministry of Consumer Protection and Agriculture for the Green Party. Now you represent Bayer, a multinational chemical pharmaceutical company that operates in the fields of healthcare and agriculture. And you play a key role in shaping the company's global sustainability strategy. From politics to the private sector, tell me in a very, if possible, rather personal scope, what motivated this transition and where do you believe you can do more good on this planet?
Yeah, first, Maria, I would like to thank you. I know Markus Schröder since 1994 because that was the year when he became a member of the parliament.
Markus Schröder?
Söder.
Söder?
Yeah, and he never ever defended me, but this morning you got him to defend me on stage, so that's off my bucket list, so thank you for that.
By saying that it's all, es sind keine Pflanzen, keine Pestizide, es sind alles nur Insektenschutzmittel, ne? And we can't feed people without putting pesticides, right? That's what he said.
So why I'm on this journey? So for the last 30 years in November, I've been involved in agriculture. I come from a small village. Both of my grandparents had a farm. Both had to give up their farm, but we were always connected to it. And of course, I'm like most of us here, part of a generation where the world population more than doubled. We often tend to forget that we are now a population of 8 billion humans. The population growth is slowing down, but what's not slowing down is our consumption patterns as humanity. They didn't play a role today, but I think it's important, if we want to make progress on biodiversity, to look at some of the forces that drive and also accelerate the problem. So half of us live off less than 3,000 euros a year. Most of us in this room probably have an income that is higher, some even an order or orders of magnitude higher. Almost 4 billion humans, 3.6, do not have a toilet in the way we are used to. And half of humanity, soon perhaps 70%, lives in cities. And that changes a lot, and that's sort of something that is worrying me a lot, how consumption patterns kind of drive a certain development. And then the other problem is we wanted to be Paris in a 1.5 degree world. We wanted to be able to keep global warming and carbon emissions in check. And collectively as humanity, we are not doing a good job. We at the moment look at temperature scenarios that are more in the 3 degree pathway because we are developing seeds that will be planted in 15 years. So I'm being asked, hey, what's going to be the temperature? And there are two hearts in my chest. One says, I want it to be the 1.5 degree, which already is hard for the food system, but we might as well overshoot by a factor of 2. In order to deal with this problem, we have to change everything in the food system. And that's sort of what drives my passion. And I got a call, it was almost to the day 6 years ago.
But you have to keep it short then. You not go back to 6 years ago and
but it was a call. It was a call.
Let's try to stay a little more local.
It was a call where the simple question was, do you want to join a company newly created? Bayer bought Monsanto. Vandana, I'm sure you followed that very closely. It's a company that has an R&D budget of 2.5 billion euros. There's no other company in the world that spends that much money in the space. It's a company that...
It's a company that produces Roundup, which is glyphosate,
produces seeds and pesticides in quantities and volumes as almost no other competitor. And the question for me was, okay, do I stay a bystander and kind of like Waldorf and Stadler's on the Muppet Show, kind of look at what's going on? Or do I leave a very nice company I worked before in the US and help this company to deal with the problems that I just described?
You mean
which includes to
the legal
transform their own
problems they're
processes.
having in the US because of Roundup? No.
Well, I woke up to very good news this morning because
Yes?
our legal problems got a bit easier this morning. No, the problem that we cannot continue to do agriculture in the way we have done before, but we need a growing demand in agricultural products. That's the conundrum we have to solve. If we don't solve it, we will see massive deforestation, we will see land use change at rates that we cannot afford.
Thank you very much. Thank you. On my right, Jan Plagge, you are an important figure in European organic farming. You are actually the head of I4RM, Organics Europe, and you are the president of Bioland, an important ecologic product in Germany, a largest organic farming association in Germany. And you are a key player in the recently published strategic dialogue on the future of EU agriculture. I'm very pleased to have you here on stage, Jan, and I wanted to ask you, in 2008, you, I believe, transformed your parents' farm into an ecologic farm, but I think we should go straight on and follow, what Mr. Berninger said, and I'm very curious about the outcome of the strategic dialogue initiated by Ursula von der Leyen, and if the strategic dialogue could be something that our Mr. Söder mentioned today in the morning, said we're not allowed to become too radical and we need to find solutions to bring things together. Is this strategic dialogue a piece in there? And how will you feed the world without pesticides? Is it possible?
To explain a bit about the outcome of the strategic dialogue on future of EU agriculture, and I'm sure Ursula von der Leyen will mention it tomorrow. Let me allow just 2 sentences and thoughts on my motivation, because it describes what exercise we did in a group of 29 stakeholders in Europe, from Fertilizers Europe to Copa-Cogeca, the big European Farmers Union, from Greenpeace to the Organic Farmers Movement. So I converted my family farm in 1993, so was not 2008. And when I listened to all these interventions this morning, it was almost like a small vita on my own motivation to really learn more about life. So if you want to understand what is organic farming about, it's not a label. The label is one function, one tool. But the main thing is understanding ecosystems, agri-ecosystems, and as part of nature, how life really functions, and to be connected, to be really connected. So that was my main motivation, to be in nature, to be in agriculture, and to be in social systems, and how to change. One of our founders was a medical doctor and a microbiologist, and I remembered, Maria, in your introduction, you said we as humans have more microorganisms in our body than humans in the world. And our founder, who invented microbiome digestive medicine in a company called Symbiofarm, so they were pharmaceutic as well, and they connected our own microbiome with soil life. And I asked them, they founded Bioland in 1971, and the mission of these 10 families, together with this medical doctor, was to learn more about life and to be always aware that we are a creature with trillions of microbiomes, and even the soil has much more. Just as our basic driving force, how complex it is to understand our living system. So that's what is driving me on. And when Ursula von der Leyen asked us in January how to overcome polarization, farmers' protest, economical problems, especially on the farm side. And then in the society, a lot of polarization between environmentalists and other groups. So how to overcome it? That was her main question, and how to reconcile agriculture and food production in the planetary boundaries. We will hear later today.
And did you manage?
And we managed it last week. Ursula von der Leyen presented the report. It was quite risky because if we fail, if she fails not to be re-elected and we fail not to present a real report out of systematic actions, really say we discussed 7 months about a systematic change altogether, and we achieved it. And if you ask me what is the main answer, so we didn't say we need to reduce the use of pesticide by 50%. We said we need to reduce harmful pesticide in agriculture to overcome the problems we have with biodiversity loss and environmental pollution. So that's very clear. And there's no doubt that we have to change agricultural systems and that we have to reduce the input. There's no doubt that we have to reconcile farmers' income with making it for all farmers much easier to change their whole system and not just focusing to one effect, like greenhouse gas emissions, like product efficiency, like yields. Because what we have seen just in the last presentation is such an important lesson. Grassland-based animal husbandry is one of the main driving forces for agrobiodiversity. But this is extensive. So if we don't extensify in many areas our agricultural production and extensify our consumption on animal protein, we can't combine sustainable agri-food systems with our planetary health diets. So this is all described in the report. And then we really overcame polarization because we are coming from so different camps. And now what I really hope is that the Commission's president, now with her vision for the future of Europe, with her new working program, with her new college, that we really achieve to establish and institutionalize such dialogue from stakeholders together with policymakers, to overcome polarization, not only in society, but to overcome really polarization between parties. The parties block themselves, politicians block themselves, silos from different civil servants and DGs block themselves. And that is our main message. We really have to overcome this blocking situation.
Well, that sounds like a very, very powerful compromise you've come up with, really very different stakeholders. Yeah. Congratulations for being in that group. And we... and we can only hope that this will really help the European Union, the Commission, to really change some things. Our last panelist is on our left, Jan-Gisbert Schultze. You are founding and managing partner at Acton Capital, leading investment in DTC businesses, fashion, lifestyle, and the consumer internet. Also, you are a dedicated advocate for the circular economy and regenerative agriculture. You founded the Soil Alliance and are developing an innovative syntropic farm in Puglia, Italy. Mr. Schultze, you are a major investor in lifestyle products, among other things. How did you discover such a different field for yourself? Why are you where you are now?
As often in my life, in this case, it again was a book. It was a book called The Omnivore Dilemma by Michael Pollan, where he's basically describing the conventional agricultural system. He's describing the organic agricultural system, and he's describing a farmer in Virginia who's called Joel Salatin. And it was, for me, an epiphany moment when I read about this farmer, because I'm not a farmer, I'm an economist. I've worked always in business. I studied business administration, but I lived on a farm in the United States when I was a foreign exchange student. It was 16 years, and at that time I loved the farm. It was a traditional Minnesota corn, soybean, hog farm where we produced 2,000 pigs a year. And at that time, I thought I could become a farmer. My life then took definitely a different route. And when I read this book, and I read about this farmer in Virginia, I realized he's doing everything differently than I had learned it. And I cannot go into details, but there were two things that impressed me. First of all, I'm a business guy, so he actually was able to sell all his products to 4,000 families in Washington, so he captured all the margin in the system, and he actually generated a very profitable farm. The second thing was, and that's much more important, he was able to build in his lifetime the farm which had 1% of humus soil carbon in the soil to 8% soil carbon. And that was a number which completely blew me away, because I was of the opinion, and that's what most people were telling at the time, that farmers are actually destroying soil and cannot rebuild soil. And so that started me to think about soil, and you have to know that I actually did an intensive course at school in biology, and I learned everything about photosynthesis, but I didn't learn anything about the carbon cycle, and basically the symbiosis between the plant and the soil. The plant is doing photosynthesis, and it is exudating 40% of the sugar that it's producing into the soil. That feeds the soil life. That's how this whole thing starts to work. The plant gives food to the soil life, and the soil life gives back food to the plant. And if you do that, you actually sequester carbon into the soil. So it was a solution to the climate change, actually a significant solution. There are estimates that you could capture 50 to 100% of the carbon dioxide that we produce in a year if we would turn systematically all over the world to regenerative agriculture. And the core of the regenerative agriculture and why that is possible is biodiversity. And I think that's very important to understand. You cannot build soil without biodiversity, and by the way, you can not build it easily if you do not integrate the animals, because that's the other important symbiosis between the plant and the animal. And the second impact is, if you have more carbon in the soil, you have more water storage capacity, you have much better infiltration rates. There's a farmer in this room, is a good friend, Sepp Braun. He did a test on his farm, and his farm is a regenerative farm, how long it would take for the water that went into the Ahrtal during the flood. And it took him 14 minutes to get that water into the ground, because he has 5% soil carbon in the soil. The second element is that if you have more soil carbon in the soil, your food has more nutrition density. And if you, and Jan, you just pointed out, there is a direct relationship between the healthiness of your the soil and your biome in your body. And all the health issues we have today are related to that. And the discussion that we are having on this panel is basically, and I'm sorry, I don't address you personally, but the company you are representing is basically following an extractive model where it's about maintaining a monoculture. And a monoculture is not natural. Nature is attacking the monoculture. How is it attacking it? With weeds. We call them Unkraut in Germany. And these are wonderful little plants.
Maybe this is a good
want to turn
a good lead-in
the system into a biodiverse system.
For the next question.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. I know. Mr. Berninger, I said it's kind of an uphill battle, and I want to throw, unfortunately, a few numbers to you. Since this year, this March, Parkinson's disease is recognized as a Berufskrankheit, a work disease, because of the year-long exposure from farmers to pesticides. In 99.6% of the urine echantillon from German citizens, we find glyphosate. When we look at pollen from German bees, here's Thomas Radetzky from the Aurelia Stiftung, we find 120 different pesticides in their pollen. Pollen is what the bees use to feed their babies. That's the baby food. I do wonder sometimes, Mr. Berninger, how do you feel about this growing toxic load we find in agriculture, that we find in our world. We have to add that glyphosate, following the WHO, is very probably cancerogenic. So, well, that's, you know this fact.
Yeah, let's talk about that fact, huh?
Absolutely, but so how do you feel around this growing toxic load, which is an issue, isn't it? I mean, it's not only Bayer, obviously, it's many companies.
Okay, so let's start with glyphosate. The European Union didn't have much appetite to re-register it. It went through a process which is, I think, the most recognized process for looking at crop protection products in the world. Came to a very clear outcome. Glyphosate is again in the market for another 10 years. And even my buddy, the German Minister of Agriculture, Cem Özdemir, had to reapprove it. So let's keep that debate within the European system. For me.
So you don't mind that it's in all our bodies, it's okay?
Wait. Excuse me, you were insinuating glyphosate causes cancer.
Well, the WHO does, not me.
Not the WHO, one part of them, but the EU had made a very clear determination, and this institution, which has talked about it, is super important. If we mess around with the EU, things are going to be a bit more complicated in Europe, so let's a bit trust those institutions. Then you insinuated a link of glyphosate to a disease that is called Parkinson's.
No, glyphosate and Parkinson's I didn't say. No.
Oh, I read it in the Spiegel earlier this week.
No.
Made that connection.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So that's not the case.
No.
Okay, good. So then
it's due to all pesticide exposure.
Then we can park that. And what I would like to say though is, Mark Twain once said that not what you don't know gets you in trouble, but what you know that just ain't so. What we are working on is changing the way we develop our crops. So practical example, your farmer in Minnesota has for a long time in the year nothing on his fields to grow, but there are wonderful plants that could grow. Many of them have been cultivated in the organic farming space. We are developing seeds out of those weeds that will be energy crops. So covercress is one example of that. We will introduce completely new crop systems, and we also have shifted all our R&D spending in the direction of regenerative agriculture. The definition for me, simply put, is, let's say, and it's unthinkable for most in agriculture, conventional agriculture and organic farming had an affair. And out of that affair, you would have a baby. That baby would be called regenerative agriculture. And what I see, we have been starting this 4 or 5 years ago, what I see in the studies is, if we take the best out of organic farming, combine it with what we know about seeds, combine it with the best in the crop protection space, and what we know about biodiversity, we will have more yield, more carbon capture in the soil, we will have in general better conditions. There's more and more data for that, and Jan, I think the report was a great report because it was one where we had a plus, where we added things together instead of the typical minus and the typical controversy in the debate. That's my main message. If we continue in the old way to talk about this, we will not solve the problem. We may feel good about it, but we will not solve the problem.
I agree. Maybe you could tell me, is organic farming able to feed the world? Because this is the very strong argument you're bringing up, that it's not able to feed the world because it has less productivity. It's less productive, right? This is a main argument.
Between 25 and 50% less yield per hectare, yeah.
So with this family planning, I'm already married. So
I'm looking forward to your baby.
I have two daughters. I have another picture and a specific answer on your question. The picture is not to marry conventional and organic farming. It's about and the baby is not regenerative, because regenerative is to regenerate agri-food systems, so really to improve them. Organic farming is one of the agroecological practical answers how to implement agroecological principles, so organic principles, biological principles, so all what you heard about, systemic, holistic way of thinking, that everything is with everything connected. So that is what we try, and we are never ready, we are never finished. We learn day by day, on every farm, on every continent. And the principle of care and health and circular thinking, animal welfare, etc., has a specific outcome and a specific development. So I wouldn't marry new, but I would say it is very, very helpful that already many conventional colleagues are implementing organic principles or regenerative principles in their agri-system. So I'm completely, I agree with you. Stop this polarization, because that is one of our main claims in the report. Time for change is now. We don't have any more time. And if time for change is now, everybody has to change. Not only the farmers, but the processors, the retailers, the financiers, all you here in the room as consumers. We all have to change every day in our diets, in our behavior, in our investments. That is a clear message in the report. And everybody has to take responsibilities. And the policymakers has to change the whole framework, that it is much easier for consumers and for all other operators in the agri-food chain to come to the best choice, to the sustainable choice.
Mr. Berninger, Plagge, I'm very happy that you're less polarizing than I really was, and that you see a future of really cooperation, which I find fantastic. And due to
the best case, what can happen from here, from your plans, that companies like Bayer Monsanto drives into a systemic change. And that they clearly state we have to reduce harmful pesticides, we need to develop diverse agri-food systems. It is not easy for your business models, but we need functioning business models for all of us in the food chain, which rely on these ecological biodiversity living principles. Excellent. Otherwise, we won't succeed.
So I want to give the two of you, obviously, as well, the opportunity just to give a very brief note where you see the future of agriculture and where you see the possibility of systemic change. Jan, do you want to start?
I would like to explain a little bit the discussion that's going on.
But very briefly, because we have this
drama
of time.
But I think it's really important to understand that there is an approach which tries to actually control nature and optimize nature according to industrial principles. And there's another approach which is simply following the principles of life, and that is actually much easier, much more effective. It can easily feed the world, and we can produce so much more food on the areas that we have today. So I'm not a fan of the polarization. Indeed, I'm not. But we need to understand that we need a paradigm shift in the way we look at things, and that we have to grab this incredible opportunity of simply looking at nature, listening at nature, and try to use these very effective principles that it shows us. And that's what regenerative agriculture is doing. And by the way, I'm certainly not fostering the idea of regenerative agriculture as Monsanto does. I'm talking about ecological or basically, organic regenerative
what
agriculture.
You're saying, Jan, is basically what Vandana said as well, that nature, the universe is technology.
The solution
nature
is
is technology.
Yeah.
Your last sentence, please.
Yeah, so
very briefly, I'm sorry.
So every second human being has food on the table every day because of artificially produced fertilizer. Every second human being. 4 billion depend on it, played a big role in the paper. I think it's one of the areas where we have to make the biggest changes in agriculture. How can you reduce the dependency of agriculture of fertilizer? Spoiler alert, has a lot to do with the plant microbe, with the soil, has also a lot to do with technologies like gene editing that allows us, for example, to get corn to produce corn without relying on fertilizer, simply because their whole plant processes will change. And the second point I want to make on pesticides and crop protection, you heard Mr. Settler earlier today. He wasn't only at the Niederösterreichischer Jagdverband, he even met with us. Yeah? And he basically helped us to develop a very clear strategy to do what's in the EU paper now, to reduce those parts of our pesticide portfolio that are harmful and to drive our innovation to crowd out some of our competitors' portfolios that are more harmful to biodiversity than others.
Good.
Which is why I think, let's not talk about pesticides as an abstract. Let's pick the top 10 that need to go away in order to improve biodiversity, and then let's go to the next 10, rather than having another 5-year debate about pesticides as a general topic. If we do that, and if we have pluses instead of minuses, I think agriculture could be a huge driver for biodiversity.
Well, it should be. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for the panel. Thank you.